Hello, I'm Terry. This is the Terry Nutlop Model Railway Station. A light here for all things model railways. And a happy new year to all people viewing. Today we're going to be showing you Subarashii Tochi, which is this revolving layout, yet another foam-based revolving layout that I made for a show in Clacton just in December. I'm going to be showing you how you can make it at home. It's very easy, and why not have a go? So keep watching. So there you can see the little Japanese tram running around the layout. Obviously it's a circle, it has to be because it's a rotating layout. And we'll just watch it for a few seconds and then I'm going to turn it off because it does tend to make a bit of a noise being hollow underneath, obviously. You don't notice that at an exhibition, but when I'm filming it, we don't want that background noise drowning out what I'm saying. Maybe we do. So with the tram stopped, we can have a look at the layout revolving, and I'll just briefly go through what it is. So it's called Subarashii Tochi, which is Japanese, meaning wonderful land. Simply a name I chose. It's difficult to choose names for some of these layouts. And it's made octagonally, it's as before with Furimadrayan, made from 5mm foam board. Now, with this one being Japanese, I wanted to depict the flooded rice fields, which are coming round into view now, into the camera. And in order to do that, I needed to raise the track up because otherwise we got a completely flat surface. And in doing that, I simply marked out a circle where the track would be. I've not gone for a perfect circle this time. I've tried to change the radius of the curve in order to try and make it look slightly more interesting rather than have a perfect radius curve the whole way around the layout. And in doing that, marking out the foam board and cutting out a raised section, simply gluing it on in 3 sections, then gluing on a piece for the road and some cardboard pieces as well that go under the buildings. And that brings the buildings and road and the railway line up away from the actual original base layer, only by 5mm, but it's enough to give that slight embankment to the track and show that it is raised up above the flooded fields. Now, all of the scenery on this pretty much comes from Temu or Kato and Tomix. So I'll just run you through very quickly that the track itself is Pico. It's just N-gauge flexible track. And I've simply bent the track to shape, pinned it loosely, and then glued it with superphatic glue. There's a join either side where the actual roadway passes, and I've used the roadway to hide the join. It works quite well. And the following step was obviously to ballast the track after I've tested that everything worked and all the wiring underneath was done. And then I started on the scenery. Well, the first thing to do was to make the lower section where the flooded fields are, to divide them with a little bit of polyfiller. I didn't want to use too much polyfiller because polyfiller adds to weight. So I've used the absolute minimum just to smooth the edges of the 5mm foam off. After that, I've painted the baseboard, I've painted the roadway, and then I've added Aqua Magic, which is a deluxe materials product, into the lower parts of the fields to give the water effect, which, as you see coming round, works quite well. A top tip for doing water, especially if you want to create depth, obviously here the fields are very shallow, but if you want to create the illusion of depth in a very shallow surface, as you'd have often with a model, if you paint a darker shade of the edge colour towards the middle, it creates the illusion of depth, because light obviously does not reflect back from deep water as it would from shallow water. And that I've found to be a very good effect in a river. So after painting the baseboard and putting the Aqua Magic on, I started with the buildings. And all of the buildings that you can see are in actual fact from Temu. Now, I believe, although I got them from Temu, and Temu doesn't say this, that they're actually Outland models. Outland models have got their own website and you can buy them direct from China. And I believe that these are just being sold through the Temu website because they appear to be the identical models that you can get from Outland. However, they're very simple kits. They simply clip together. I've used a little bit of glue with them in order that they don't fall apart. There's no instructions with them, but the tags on the buildings are so well made that they do not go together in any way except the way they're designed. I didn't need to clean them up at all. There was no flash on them. They're made from a very thick plastic, almost like a resin, which does bond with normal glue that you'd use for plastic kits. And I found them very good. They don't have glazing. I've put glazing into them with clear acrylic. Other than that, I think they're very good value. I don't believe that any one of those buildings that you can see going round cost more than £4.95. So I think that they're very good value. The signs on them come from Model Railway Signs. They're available on the Model Railway Quest website. And the trees are Temu. I've slightly adapted them because as they come from Temu, they're very plasticky. So what I've done is rolled the trees in a PVA glue and then scattered them with ground cover and then the pink blossom, as you can see. That's had quite a good effect, I believe, and a lot of people at the show remarked about how good the trees were. Very simple, very easy to do. It took me no more than 5 minutes to do all of them. They're simply pushed into the foam base, very easy to plant. And the street lights, as they go round, you can see are illuminated as well. Also are a Temu product. I got all 10 that come in a pack from Temu that were £9.95. The catenary masts are from Kato, and they were all double masts. So I've simply cut one of the arms off with a plastic sprue cutter in order to make them single track. They're plastic, so they won't stand a great knock, but they're robust enough that you can actually touch them with your finger and they won't break instantly. There is a little bit of play in them, but they wouldn't withstand the sort of damage that metal masts can. However, I got them at a show very cheaply, and that's the reason I use them. This is not going to be a layout that is going to be about on the circuit for years. It will make 3 or 4 visits to shows, and then we'll move on to something else. Now, the road vehicles and the figures are from Tomix. They came via eBay, a good purchase, and everything else is just Temu, ground cover, the ground scatter, and a little bit of Temu, what they call static grass, but to be perfectly honest with you, it doesn't work very well as static grass. It's more just a ground cover. However, in Engage, sometimes static grass can be a bit excessive. I'm quite pleased with it, and a lot of visitors at the show said it looked really good. And let's just have a look now underneath at the electrics, because that, of course, is the trick as to how it works and how it revolves. So we have the usual jewellery stand. It rotates, as I've used on the previous rotating layouts I've shown you before. Buy these from Amazon. They're going up in price almost by the week now. I think they're about £20 now. I got 3 originally and they were about 16. Simply an on-off switch, and they come with a remote, so you can change the speed that they rotate at, you can change the direction they rotate at, and I think for even for £20, that can actually, according to the instructions, turn 8 kilograms. I haven't tried that. I wouldn't try 8 kilograms on them, but certainly the weight of a layout, which weighs maybe 2 or 3 kilograms, they can cope with perfectly happily. It runs the entire day of a show, a full 6 to 8 hours, on just 2 AA batteries that simply go in the base. I shall show you there. That's all that's doing it. 2 AA batteries, and it runs for a full 8-hour show, no problem at all. In actual fact, I've had one of these running, and I've got the original batteries in it just to see how long it will last. And one of them has done a show now. It's done 3 shows with the same batteries. So although you can run it off a little USB charge port there, it doesn't have rechargeable batteries. That would be possibly if you wanted to have it in a shop running 24/7. But to take to a show, it runs just great on the 2 batteries. They're not included. You have to supply them. But I still think for £20, that's a good buy. I wouldn't try to make something rotate as smoothly as that myself. I simply bought them in. Right, let's have a look underneath the layout and have a look at these electrics. So here's a look at the underneath. And as you can see, it's made in the octagonal shape with just 2 cross pieces, all of foam board, that give it the strength it needs. The plastic circle, as you see in the middle there, is stuck on with hot glue, and that of course slots onto the top of the rotating jewellery stand. This comes with the stand, and it gives you a greater area to display things. Now the power comes from this lithium ion pack that's just sitting there. It sits behind this piece at the moment. Of course, when it's flat, that then sits on this shelf and is kept out of the way. Of course, this is the bottom we're looking at. So we'll talk about that briefly in a moment. But as you can see, it's got a connector there which simply unplugs so that we can remove the battery to charge it, although it would be possible with the charging lead there to charge it in place. But I think that if anything is going to fail on this, it will be the lithium ion battery pack. So to make it easy to remove simply means if it fails at a show, I can simply swap it in a matter of seconds for another one. The positive and negative come from the battery pack and initially go round into this pulse wave modulation unit. Simply here on the edge, we have a double pole, double throw switch, which allows the polarity on the track to be reversed, and a simple controller on the edge just to control the speed. This was purchased from Amazon. I wouldn't consider trying to make one of these myself. The components cost more than to buy them in ready-made. I believe now, if you buy them in bulk, you can buy them for £3.49. So the actual components required in making that would cost you a lot more than simply buying them ready-made, all working. It comes out, we then go to the track output there, it goes across to the track output the other side. Being a circle, it wasn't necessary, but I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a voltage drop across this and to allow for smooth running, and therefore I put a second feed on the opposite side. But being a closed loop, of course, one connection would have been perfectly adequate. The second feed that comes off this connector here from the lithium ion battery pack goes round into this little item down here. That is a buck converter, which simply is a smooth voltage regulator. Now that drops the 12 volts from the battery pack down to 2.8 volts. You adjust the voltage with the little blue box there by turning the screw, and it simply has 2 capacitors and a little IC circuit which reduces the power down to 2.8 volts, or whatever you wanted to set it to. Now, it's important, if you're going to use these, that you have one of these. And this is simply a voltmeter stroke circuit tester. You can get these for £10 or less. Certainly something pretty important to have with model railways when you're doing electrics, because it can test for continuity, i.e. have you got any breaks in the wires. But when you're adjusting voltages, you don't want to guess it and have the voltage too high and blow your LEDs. And with this, you can set it exactly to the voltage you want. The LED lamps are 3 volts. I set it to 2.8, and that buck converter will keep the voltage constantly at 2.8 volts. It's got a slight surge protection in it, so not that you would get a surge from a lithium ion battery pack, but as you turn the pack on, there is the potential for a slight surge to occur, and that also protects the LEDs and extends their lives. The rest of the wiring is simply a bit of a rat's nest coming from all the individual LEDs. Each one has a positive and negative. They're all simply attached to the positive or negative side of these boards. In actual fact, I soldered them. What could have been easier would simply to have been to use these connector blocks and simply tie them all in together. I thought that afterwards, and I should have really just used these connector blocks, which in themselves are simply glued to the base with a little bit of the superphatic. Finally, I've simply tidied up the wires with some simple tie wraps to make sure that everything is held up away from the table or whatever the layout sits on, because you have to remember this is turning. Anything hanging down will get snagged. Now, a very interesting point with these little street lamps is, as you can see here, the little base of the street lamp pokes through, and these are adjustable. When you actually get them, they're a fairly universal street lamp designed to either be N, TT, or even up to HO. And by adjusting the length of the pole that sticks through into the baseboard, and then a tiny spot of super glue on the actual plastic base that sits above the baseboard, you can adjust the height of these street lamps to suit the scale that you're working in. So the point of this, the point of me showing you this, is to show you that this is achievable by anyone. There's no magic, there's no trick to it. And although the wiring might initially look quite complicated, if you were to remove all of the street light wiring, which is here, it is very simple with simply the pulse wave modulator and the 2 feeds to the track. As I said earlier, you don't even need the 2 feeds. You could basically remove all of this wiring and simply have the battery pack plugged straight into the pulse wave modulator and a simple feed to the track, and that would still work. Right, let's just have a little sum up and we'll talk about the battery pack. So Desmond has just come in to join us for this last little bit, because as you know by now, Desmond is very health and safety conscious, and he just wanted to be here while we talk about these lithium ion battery packs. So this one is rated at, I shall hold it up to the camera so that you can see, it says 800 mAh. That's milliamp hours. Now, what does that mean? That basically means a milliamp is a thousandth of an amp, so it's 8 thousandths of an amp hours, or 8 amp hours. That means that for 8 hours, it can supply power at the rate of 1 amp. Now, with a model railway, particularly these revolving railways, they're drawing half an amp, possibly with a lot of lighting on, up to 3/4 of an amp. That's the reason I use that buck converter, because without going into great depths about it, unlike a resistor, it actually reduces the power that is being drained from the battery. A resistor drains the same as the 12 volts would, and you just simply uses the power and dissipates it as heat. You don't really want heat building up underneath a cardboard and foam baseboard. And the buck converter, simply through the electronics, and I won't go into how it works at the moment, we can have a program about that later if people are interested, but through the electronics simply acts like a gate, turning the current on and off very rapidly and actually reducing the voltage to the 2.8 volts that I've set it to. That way you're not draining the battery excessively like you would do with a conventional resistor. That's the way I use them. They also provide a protection to the LEDs, and as I've said on several forums where buck converters have been mentioned, I do think they're worth the cost. Again, buying them in bulk, which I've done, they cost £3 to £4 for that little unit that's under Subarashii Tochi. You can spend up to £15 for them. I think that's excessive, but the more you pay, the more power they can handle. Now, that's something important to remember. Now, with these battery packs, of course, as I say, it's rated at 8,000 milliamp hours. But you need to check when you're buying these, where you're buying them from, and are they protected? Now, inside this little pack, it's got a little plastic casing. Inside here are a series of batteries, and these batteries are connected together. Now, they're rechargeable lithium ion batteries, but more importantly in this pack is it has a surge protection, it has an overcharge protection, an undercharge protection, and it also has a resettable fuse. Now, that means that if you've got a short circuit and were stupid or unlucky enough to connect the positive and negative of this output terminal together, you won't get an explosion or very rapid overheating with these batteries. The cutout will come in and it will simply turn the current off, exactly the same way as I can turn the on-off switch at the side. Once the short circuit's removed, within a minute, the fuse resets itself and you can use it again. Now, without this surge protection, as Desmond would like to point out, potentially these can be quite dangerous. So buying them as units like this, with the overcharge protection, the surge protection, and the resettable fuse, they're safe. When you buy the very cheap ones from China that don't have this, you're taking a chance. I'm not saying they're going to catch fire. I'm not saying you're going to have an accident with them, but the potential is there without all of those little electronic bits and pieces inside this little box that protects it. That's why when I buy these packs, I always get them from a very reputable company. I don't like to pay less than £35 to £45 for one of these packs. That sounds quite expensive, I'm sure, for a battery pack. However, they're guaranteed to be recharged at least 500 times. Considering 8,000 milliamp hours lasts a full exhibition day, that means 500 exhibition days before this will pack up. And I'm sure in actual fact, it will last longer than that. It's guaranteed 500 complete drains and recharge. So I think for £45, these are good value. However, if you buy cheaper, you are going to take a chance. So always make sure wherever you get these from, I get these direct from China, from a very reputable company in China. I won't advertise them because they change their name quite regularly, but you can buy these on eBay. Always make sure when you buy them from China that they come with the correct 3-pin UK plug. Of course, that's if you're in the UK, or the correct charging adapter for your country. And all reputable, barely say the word, all reputable sellers and retailers of these lithium ion batteries will ask you the country that you're from, will make sure that they send the right one. If you get a cheap one and it comes with the adapter that you plug into here, with just the 2 flat pins, i.e. a European plug, and you're in the UK, I wouldn't use it. I'd send it back. Because if the supplier doesn't know what voltage for the transformer to charge these you should be using, then I wouldn't really suggest that they're a very good supplier. The company I get them from, they come with a proper UK plug, it's all certified, and then you're all safe. So as Desmond said, he'd like to make sure that that's what you buy. Never buy cheap, you buy cheap, you buy twice. And of course, with lithium ion batteries, you've got to remember there's a lot of power in that little small box, and potentially there's a fire hazard. So always buy quality lithium ion batteries from a reputable seller. Easy for me to say. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. As usual, like, subscribe. It does help the channel. And share it to someone that you think might like it. The whole point of this channel is to try and encourage people to have a go. We're simply saying model railways are easy. Have a go. Make a start. Do something. Don't talk about it. Let's make some models. Okay, as usual, catchphrase. Desmond knows it. I know it. You should know it. Nice one. I'll see you next time.